The dust lifted slowly from the wide prairie as the sun sank low behind the distant mesas, turning the land the color of burning copper. And Jacob Cole stood alone outside his ranch house with his hat pulled low, watching the horizon as if it might answer the ache that had been growing inside him for years. Because since the death of his mother, the house had felt hollow, the walls echoing with silence, the nights stretching longer than the days. And although he was known across the territory as a hard-working cowboy with steady hands and an unbreakable will, there was one truth he never spoke aloud. He was tired of coming home to emptiness, tired of eating cold meals, tired of living without warmth. And so when he pinned the notice in town, simple words asking for a maid to help keep the ranch in order, he believed that was all he wanted. Just someone to cook clean and leave no mark on his guarded life. Yet fate had already begun sharpening its knife. The following afternoon the wind shifted strangely, carrying with it the distant rhythm of hooves and a silence that felt heavy rather than peaceful. And when Jacob looked up, he saw a lone figure approaching on horseback, tall and proud, moving with a grace that did not belong to the town women he expected. And as the rider came closer, his breath caught because she was Apache, unmistakably so, her long black hair braided tightly down her back, her posture straight as a drawn bow, her eyes dark and steady, not lowered in fear or submission. And when she dismounted, she did so without asking permission, tying her horse as if she already belonged there. And Jacob's hand instinctively moved near his belt, though he felt no immediate threat. Only confusion, and he spoke sharply, asking why she had come, telling her he was looking for a maid. Not trouble, not war, not complications. And that was when she met his gaze without flinching and said words that struck him harder than any bullet ever had. "I came to be your wife." And the world seemed to tilt beneath his boots as memories of violence, fear, and stories whispered around campfires rushed into his mind. Stories of raids and bloodshed. Stories that had taught him to see her people as enemies, long before he ever met one face to face. Yet here she stood, calm and unarmed, carrying herself like someone who had already survived worse than rejection. And when he demanded to know her name, she answered simply, Ayana, meaning eternal bloom. And something about that meaning unsettled him because nothing in his life had bloomed in a long time. He told her she must be mistaken, that he never asked for a wife, that he was not the kind of man an Apache woman should seek. But she did not move, did not argue, only explained that her people were being driven from the land, that promises made by men in uniforms had been broken, that survival now required courage of a different kind, and she had chosen him because she had watched him from afar, had seen him treat hired hands with fairness, had seen him refuse to raise his rifle against women and children during a skirmish years before, and Jacob felt exposed, as if she had stripped away the armor he wore so carefully, and still he resisted, telling her that the world would never accept such a union, that hatred lived in the soil itself. But Ayana answered that hatred only lived where it was allowed to grow, and that if he sent her away she would leave, but she would not beg. And as the wind stirred her braids and the sun dipped lower, Jacob felt a strange pull inside him, not desire, not yet, but a recognition that this moment was a crossroads, and if he turned her away, his life would continue exactly as it had, safe, lonely, and small. So against every instinct taught to him since childhood, he allowed her to stay the night in the barn, telling himself it was only temporary. Yet as darkness fell and he lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another presence on his land, he realized that something irreversible had already begun, that the woman who came as a maid had declared herself a wife, and whether he accepted it or not, everything he believed about loyalty, love, and identity was about to be tested by fire, blood, and truth. And if this story has already stirred something inside you, if you feel the tension of destiny pulling these two souls together against all odds, then stay with us, because this is only the beginning. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter where everything truly begins to change. Morning broke over the ranch with a pale, uncertain light, as if even the sun hesitated to witness what was unfolding. And Jacob Cole stepped out of his house to find Ayanna already awake, standing near the corral with her face lifted toward the sky, whispering words in her own language that sounded like a prayer older than the land itself. And for a moment he simply watched her, struck by how naturally she fit into the landscape, as if the earth itself recognized her. And though he reminded himself she was only there temporarily, a guest at best, an obligation at worst, he could not deny the strange calm that had settled over the place since her arrival. Yet calm was fragile, and by mid-morning it shattered when a neighbor rode in unannounced, eyes narrowing the moment he saw her, his hand tightening on his reins as suspicion and prejudice rose to the surface, forcing Jacob into a choice he had avoided his entire life: silence or defense. And when he spoke, asserting that Ayanna was under his protection, the words surprised even him, because protection implied responsibility, and responsibility implied commitment. And as the neighbor rode away, muttering threats and warnings of trouble to come, Jacob felt the weight of what he had done settle into his bones. Over the days that followed, Ayanna proved she was more than capable, not just cleaning or cooking, but repairing fences, tending wounds, reading the land with an instinct he had never learned. And each shared sunrise chipped away at the walls Jacob had built around his heart, as she told him stories by the fire at night, stories of rivers that remembered names, of ancestors who walked beside the living, of loss so deep it reshaped entire nations. And in return he spoke of his mother, of how loneliness had hardened him, of how fear disguised itself as pride. And slowly, without ceremony, respect grew into trust, and trust into something far more dangerous, something neither of them named. Yet the world outside the ranch was not changing with them, and trouble arrived in the form of soldiers and townsmen, driven by rumors and hatred, demanding Ayanna be handed over, calling her presence a threat. And when Jacob stood between them and her, rifle lowered but resolve unbroken, he understood fully that the choice he had made could not be undone. That love, because it was love now, undeniable and fierce, was never safe, only worth it. And when Ayanna stepped beside him, not behind, and declared before all that she was his wife by her people's law and by her own will, the moment burned itself into history, igniting violence and courage in equal measure. And though blood was spilled and the ranch was nearly lost, what remained standing in the aftermath was stronger than wood or stone. It was a bond forged in defiance, compassion, and shared survival. And as the dust settled once more over the prairie, Jacob knew his life would never return to what it had been, because emptiness had been replaced by purpose, fear by belonging, and solitude by a woman who had crossed every boundary to stand at his side. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that love can rise even where the world insists it should not, then make sure you subscribe to the channel, because stories like this deserve to be remembered, shared, and continued, and your support keeps these powerful journeys alive.